Now, there are things I could talk about, and there are things I think people would suspect or like me to talk about. Call it coy or delusional. I like to talk about things that people don't expect me to talk about. Keep people guessing, because part of being interested is not fulfilling expectations, not letting people know what your next sentence is going to be. Being unpredictable while still staying on track with your own personal thoughts. You can't be unpredictable just for the sake of being unpredictable, or then you're going to constantly be throwing off your own identity. So, a story is very much part of my identity, and very much a part of my life. And although it's not a story people might expect I'm going to talk about tonight, there are some people that knew and have heard the story spread about, but there are other people who knew I would tell it at some point on a different level. Make it public. Well, tonight I'm going to talk about Teddy the Greek. My friend, Teddy the Greek. Now, the way I first met Teddy the Greek was through my friend Tom. Tom of Maine, as far as I know, has nothing to do with toothpaste. But things in this universe are linked in ways I don't perceive, so who's to say? Tom of Maine, when I originally met him, I thought of him as benign in that he didn't hurt matters, but not as an ally. Because it was at the time in 1997 when to be an ally out on Grateful Dead tour, further tour it was at the time, following the death of Jerry Garcia, was to be someone who was very much life was consumed with the music of Jerry Garcia and believed in its power and wanted to perpetuate it to future generations. Whereas Tom of Maine was more a fan of the scene itself. That being said, Tom liked me well enough. He also liked people who I saw as adversaries. And that's where I felt he was benign. But, okay, I saw myself as a point of light. And he saw these other people, even people who I saw as adversaries, as a point of light. I didn't see Tom as a point of light at the time. But if you think about the people who are look up at the constellations and connect the dots between all the points of light and say, hey, there's a lion. Hey, there's Osiris, That's a different type of person. And that's what Tom was. He was a social networker. He saw connections in people that the people themselves might not see. So it was in the early 2000s that Tom introduced me to Teddy the Greek. Teddy the Greek had 25 years of age on me, perhaps, maybe more. He didn't look like it. He wasn't a hippie. He wasn't someone you would describe as hippie. Very New York guy, and still had his old world accent because he came from Greece to America as an immigrant. At the age of 17, I would later find out. Now we'll jump to that day I found these things out. I was at the Electric Factory, and I was at a show. I believe it was Galactica was the band that was playing. I was set up to vend food in the parking lot outside the Electric Factory, rather the alley, and people were making their way into the show. Well, most people were already in the show, and I had a couple college kids in front of me. And like, hey, dude, aren't you packing up and going into the show, bro? And I'm like, nah, I don't have the money to get a ticket tonight. Just gotta make some money. And they're like, make some money? Rather than go see the concert? And I'm like, well, yeah, I have 2 kids. One's 4 and one's 1. So I have to provide for these kids. I'm not going to be seeing the concert. So you're out here more. Actually, you're actually out here more for the money than you are out here for the music. Now, I could relate to these people because that wasn't their naive way of thinking. Wasn't that strange to me because 5, 6 years earlier, I could have totally related to it. I couldn't really relate to the responsibilities of being a parent, and anyhow, and this idea that you need to be at that place to make money rather than contribute to the music. And I'm like, well, I try and contribute to it in other ways. I try to make good food for people who are going into the show because I do love music, but you're not going into the show tonight, bro. Tonight you're just here for the money. And all the while, these two college kids were giving me this stuff. I see off to my right Teddy the Greek, who Tom had introduced me to a couple years earlier, watching it all. And as soon as they leave, he walks up to me and says, "Fuck them motherfuckers. Listen, you're here to make money for your fucking family. Fuck them fucking yuppie sons of bitches. They know nothing. They know nothing about responsibility. You know what you need to do, and that's what you're here to do. Fuck them motherfucker." He was so mad at them. Way more mad at them than I was. Something that he saw related him back to a point in time. He's like, "You're doing exactly what you need to do. You need to make money for your family because that's what you do. Now look at this. Look at this at what you cook. What is this?" And at the time I was making veggie quesadillas and grilled cheese. He's like, "What is this? Cheese and bread? What is this cheese and bread? I mean, why is that what you choose to make?" Well, actually, it had been my ex who'd gotten me into the food vending. I started off first money I'd made on tour was doing Grateful Dead bootleg videotapes because that was part of perpetuating the legacy of the Grateful Dead. But food being something people needed, even outside of the Grateful Dead community, allowed us to expand our tour networking, this and that. Okay, so she was actually the reason we got into selling food. And she was a vegetarian at the time, and I had been a vegetarian at one point too, so I could relate to that. But that's why we did vegetarian food. He said, "You know cook meat?" He's like, "Listen, have you ever cooked meat before? Do you know anything about it?" Well, it so turned out that just a couple weeks earlier, I'd been at a festival. And I was making no money selling my grilled cheese and veggie quesadillas. But I went to the grocery store, and while I was buying more supplies to try and sell food, I decided I was going to cook something for myself, and I bought some pork chops. And when I got back and started frying up them pork chops, before I even got them cooked up, people came up and started wanting to buy them. So with the things Teddy was telling me, were things I'd seen already, he said, "Listen to me." He said, "You cook the meat. You cook the meat. People see the meat cooking. They hear the meat cooking. They smell the meat. They buy. Bubby, even if they are not hungry, they buy. Cook the meat." He said, Why? Why do you not cook meat?" I told him, I was like, I'm listening to you. I'm listening to you. And I was very much listening to him. He said, "Listen, Bobby, tonight you make what you make. You have what you have. But listen to me. Coming up in New Year's will be fish at Hampton, Virginia for New Year's Eve." This was 2003, I believe. It was going to be the New Year's Eve of 2003. "You go. You be ready for that, Bubby. You take the meat there. You have meat in mind?" And, "Yes, I do, Teddy." "Okay. You take that idea and you do it there. You be ready because you can make so much money." Well, much money we ever was making selling food was like $300 a night, period. Never topped that. Like $300 a night was, period, the most money we could make selling food. And come that fish, New Year's Eve, it so happened, I was pretty ready. I was only able to do 2 of the 3 nights for it due to vehicle troubles that will become part of a later story. Rather unique vehicle troubles. But anyhow, 2 nights. Within those 2 nights, I made $1,700 I came home with. And Teddy, he told me, he said, "Listen to me, Bobby." He He told me all that night in that electric factory. He told me his whole life story, kind of. He said, I come to America when I was 17 years old, Bubby. And I come to New York City, and I look at New York City, and I see all the beautiful women, and I say, this is the place for me, Bobby. He said, I've lived a wonderful life here. I have known many beautiful women. At one time, I had a beautiful woman in every city I went to. They was like my wife. Each and every city I had a woman who was like my wife in that city. He's like, but Bobby, you're a family man. You live in the country. I want to see what you will do with this money. I want to see I want to see you make money. I want to see what you do with it. Because I think you live a beautiful life, and I want to see how that life turns out. So anyhow, he told me that, and I made lots of money. Flash forward some point in time, 2005, 2006, somewhere in that neighborhood. There's a show in Georgia, and I believe it's in Athens, Georgia. Yes, because that's where the college is, and that's where Widespread Panic, I believe, first started off. But they're doing some shows 3 nights in Athens, Georgia. And there was a lot of tour people there ready to go for it. Well, I went to City Hall and got the business license and stuff ready. And so, just in case people came around and checked for that. Well, it so happened that night people did come around and check. And I was the only person who had a business license, and everybody else got ran off. And as they were running people off, there was Teddy there. He's like, Bubby, you got a license? I'm like, I told the cops, I'm like, this guy here, he's with me. So I let Teddy come in underneath my vending license. Because I owed the man. I mean, so much of what I learned about the business, I learned from him. How could I allow him to be shut down? I couldn't tell him everybody was under my business license. Although I would have liked to have, but I covered Teddy as part of my business, and he set up selling his shish kebabs. Same thing he sold in New York City before he ever did Grateful Dead tour. And he started doing Grateful Dead tour in 1973 when he came near New York City, and he went out following them. He did other bands, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin. But the Grateful Dead tour scene was had more of an open vendor market for it, and he continued it up all through the 70s, 80s, 90s, up until these 2000s. And so, there he was, covered under my business license. We had 3 days to kill. So, not only did he vend side by side with me, making more money off of shish kebabs than I was making down there, by the way. But not only that, but because people kind of liked him better. He was the old man. He was a New York City guy. He had a better accent. And people, I did plenty of business. I made decent money and everything. But I think he probably made a little more. And we shared a motel. Now, at the motel that we shared, Teddy dominated the remote and the television, and he hate watched. All he did was hate watch CNN. And his favorite thing to hate watch on CNN was Larry King. And CNN in general. But he was always like, look, Bubby, look at the guest he have. Look at the ethnicities. This one is this one. This one is this one. This one is this one. See, that one's the same as him. That one's the same as him. The ones of the ethnicity of him, he promotes. The others, he asks the hard questions. Watch him promote. Watch him promote. Everything he watched for those 3 days, during all that television watching, was all this stuff I never wanted to know. This knowledge he carried around, if you call it. They say ignorance is bliss, and it is. And the seeds that he sowed during that time is like, they were corrupting. They really, really were. They shattered my innocence to a degree over what the news was, what certain news was, and what it was out to do. And the seeds have grown into what they are, and they've only gotten, if they weren't true, they would have been plucked up long ago. But because the things he noticed and pointed out were true, they can't be erased. But anyhow, that's the story of Teddy the Greek.